I was at home when my phone rang. It was my son, his voice tight and urgent. Dad, is my wife home? I just saw someone who looks exactly like her boarding a plane with another man. A few seconds later, he sent me a photo. I froze. In the living room, my daughter-in-law was doing yoga on the mat. She looked up at me and smiled as if nothing had happened. My heart nearly stopped. If she was standing right in front of me, then who was the person boarding that plane with my son? I'm incredibly grateful you're here. Quick question, how did you find this channel? YouTube recommendations, a friend's share? Drop a comment below, I read them all. Just a heads up, this story includes fictionalized elements for educational and entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to actual people or places is coincidental, but the protective lessons I'm sharing, those could genuinely help you safeguard your loved ones. My name is Camden Pierce. I'm 59 years old, a widower and a forensic accountant who spent 3 decades following money trails most people worked hard to bury. After my wife Eleanor passed away 5 years ago, my son Brett became the center of my world. When he married Rachel 2 years later, I believed our family felt whole again. That was 3 years ago. I was wrong. I was reviewing quarterly statements when Brett called. His voice was tight, breathless. Dad, is Rachel home right now? I set down my pen. Morning light filtered through the windows of our Pinehurst home. What's going on? A pause. Behind him, I heard the hum of an aircraft cabin, muffled voices, air vents, overhead bins closing. I'm in the cockpit at gate C7. My flight to Maui is boarding. During pre-flight checks, I looked through the flight deck window and saw someone in seat 3A who looks exactly like Rachel. Business class. She's with a man I don't recognize. They're holding hands. My pulse shifted. You're certain? I'm trained to notice details. Burgundy sweater, the floral scarf I bought her last month. She's wearing your pearl earrings, the ones you gave her at our wedding. I stood slowly. Where did she say she was this week? Denver. Extended nonprofit board meeting. She left 2 weeks ago. But if that's her in 3A on my plane to Maui, then everything she told me was a lie. Can you take a photo? Already did. I'm sending it. Dad. If that's really her who did, I say goodbye to this morning when I called home. My phone vibrated. The image loaded, grainy but clear enough. Seat 3, a burgundy sweater. Floral silk scarf. Pearl earrings catching cabin light. 3 pearls set in gold. A man sat beside her in 3B mid-40s navy suit. His hand rested casually on her knee. Their heads leaned close. The woman's profile, Rachel's face. Rachel's smile. Do you see it? Brett asked. I see it. That's her. The scarf, the earrings. If she's boarding my flight right now, then who's in our house? Give me 1 minute, I said. I walked into the living room. Sunlight streamed across the hardwood floor. A yoga mat was spread out. Rachel was in downward dog, breathing steady. I'd watched that routine every morning for 5 years. She glanced up. Dad. Everything okay? The word felt natural. Since the wedding, she'd slipped into our family with ease, filling the quiet Eleanor left behind. Brett called, I said evenly. Wanted to make sure you were home. She lowered into a seated stretch. That's sweet. Tell him I'm fine. My phone's in the kitchen on silent. You know I don't like distractions. I studied her face. The freckle near her left temple. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear. Everything matched. Back in my office, I called Brett. She's here, doing yoga. Says her phone's on silent. Silence. Dad, did you see the photo? I did. I can still see her through the cockpit window. She just laughed at something he said. His hand's on her arm now. If that's Rachel on my plane, then who's in our house? I felt my chest tighten. You said she left for Denver 2 weeks ago. Yes, Wednesday morning. I opened our home security system. Let me check something. I scrolled back. This morning, Rachel on her mat. Yesterday making breakfast. The day before reading on the couch. 2 weeks ago. Timestamp 6:47 a.m. The front door opened. Rachel stepped out with a rolling suitcase blue wool coat. She locked the door and walked to a black SUV idling at the curb. It pulled away. I kept the footage running. 7:05 a.m., 18 minutes later, the front door opened again. A woman entered. Same height, same build, same hair color. But she wore a gray cardigan instead of a blue coat. No suitcase. She moved slowly through the house, looking around carefully, studying. She opened cabinets, checked the refrigerator, ran her hand along the granite countertop as if memorizing texture. She selected a coffee mug, the chipped one Rachel refused to throw away. This woman knew which mug to use. Brett, I said steadily. When you land, observe her from a distance. Don't approach. Don't let her know you're watching. See where she goes, who she meets. Then call me. You think it's really Rachel? That my wife is on my plane with another man? I stared at the split-screen footage. On the left, Rachel leaving. On the right, someone else arriving. I think we need more information. What kind? The kind that explains how your wife can be in two places at once. After he hung up, the house felt unnervingly quiet. Through the wall, I heard movement, water running, cabinets closing. The ordinary sounds of someone who knew exactly where everything belonged. The woman who looked like Rachel, sounded like Rachel, knew which burner heated most evenly and where we kept spare light bulbs. The woman who had been living in my house for 2 weeks. I opened my laptop and began pulling financial records. If someone was impersonating my daughter-in-law, there would be traces. Subtle inconsistencies. Patterns. Numbers don't lie. 3 hours later, my phone buzzed. Followed them from baggage claim, Brett texted. Black sedan to Fairmont Orchid. Watched from lobby. They checked in together. Same room. Dad. What's happening? I looked toward my office door. Beyond it, the woman who wasn't Rachel hummed softly in the kitchen. I typed slowly. Come home as soon as you can. Don't confront her. Not yet. His reply came instantly. Who is that woman in our house? I stared at the frozen security footage. 2 women. One leaving. One arriving. 18 minutes apart. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I typed the only honest answer I had. I don't know, but I'm going to find out. The next morning arrived with the kind of clarity that comes after a sleepless night. I'd spent hours staring at financial spreadsheets trying to make sense of the impossible. By dawn, I'd made a decision. Confrontation would come eventually, but first I needed certainty. In my 20 years advising clients on fraud cases, I'd learned that assumption gets you nowhere. Evidence is everything. I found her in the kitchen around 8 making breakfast. She moved with easy confidence, reaching for the coffee filters without hesitation, knowing exactly which cabinet held the good mugs. She'd mastered the choreography of our household perfectly. I poured myself coffee, watching her slice fruit. The morning light caught her profile, and for a moment the resemblance was so complete it made my chest ache. Except it wasn't Rachel. I knew that now with cold certainty. I kept my voice casual. Brett and Rachel's anniversary is coming up soon. Remember that dinner you two had in Portland? He mentioned wanting to go back to that restaurant. She looked up, knife paused mid-slice. Oh yes, that was lovely. The waterfront view was beautiful. Wrong. They'd celebrated in Seattle at a small French place Rachel had insisted on. Rachel would have corrected me immediately, probably with a laugh about how I always mixed up their travel plans. This woman just smiled and kept cutting strawberries. Throughout the morning, I watched her perform the role flawlessly. She watered Eleanor's herb garden with care. She folded laundry with precise movements. She even hummed while she worked, though the melody was wrong. Rachel hummed old jazz standards. This woman hummed something contemporary I didn't recognize. Small details, tiny inconsistencies, but they added up. Around noon, I called David Torres. We'd worked together on several cases over the years. If anyone could trace digital footprints without raising alarms, it was David. I kept my voice low, standing in my office with the door closed. I need you to check something for me. Discreetly. My family accounts. I need to know if there's been any unusual access in the past few weeks. He didn't ask why. Give me an hour. While I waited, I made coffee. She appeared in the doorway watching me with that concerned expression Rachel often wore. You seem distracted today, Dad. Everything all right? I measured grounds carefully, not looking up. Just busy week ahead. You know how quarter end gets. She accepted this and returned to the living room. I watched her go, noting how she stirred her coffee. 2 quick circles, no tap on the rim. Rachel had a specific ritual. 3 circles clockwise, 2 taps with the spoon, then she'd set it down on the right side of her cup. Always, every single time for 5 years. This woman didn't know that. David called back within the hour. Camden, you were right to be concerned. There's a second device logged into your joint accounts. Has been for about 2 weeks. My hand tightened on the phone. Location: Maui. Someone's been monitoring all your financial activity. Bank accounts, credit cards, everything. They set up an email forwarding rule too. All correspondence from your financial institutions is being copied to an external address. I thought about the security footage. Rachel leaving at 6:47. This woman arriving at 7:05. 18 minutes to switch places, and in that time, someone had locked down their access to every account we shared. What else can you tell me? The sound of typing came through the line. Recent charges from Maui. Fairmont Orchid Resort, Tiffany and Company, Roy's Restaurant. Want me to keep going? No. My voice came out flat. That's enough. There's one more thing. Withdrawal pattern. Small amounts always under 10,000. 9,800 exactly, multiple times over the past 3 months. Classic structuring to avoid federal reporting requirements. Whoever was behind this understood financial regulations. They'd been planning this, carefully moving money in amounts that wouldn't trigger automatic alerts. Can you trace where the withdrawals went? Offshore accounts. I can dig deeper, but that takes time and leaves footprints. Do it, but carefully. After I hung up, I sat staring at my computer screen. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture I didn't want to see. This wasn't simple deception. This was sophisticated fraud, the kind that required planning, coordination, and inside knowledge. I heard her moving around in the next room, humming that wrong melody. She'd been here for 2 weeks, living in our home, sleeping in our guest room, playing the role of daughter-in-law with practiced ease. And somewhere in Maui, someone had been watching through our accounts, monitoring every transaction, every email, every digital footprint we left. My phone buzzed. A text from David. Second device is actively monitoring right now. Whoever's on the other end, they're watching in real time. I looked at my closed office door. Thought about the woman on the other side moving through our house with confidence born from careful study. Thought about Rachel in Hawaii with a man whose name I didn't know. Thought about Brett coming home tomorrow, expecting to find his wife waiting for him. Instead, he'd find an actress who knew which mug to use but couldn't remember where they'd celebrated their anniversary. Another text arrived. You Camden, this is bigger than identity theft. The offshore accounts, the monitoring, the structuring, this is organized, professional. You need to be careful. I typed back slowly. Too late for careful. I'm already in it. His response came immediately. Then document everything. Because when this breaks open, you're going to need proof. I stood and walked to my office window. Outside, September, sunshine painted our neighborhood in shades of gold. The Sullivans were walking their dog. A delivery truck idled at the corner. Everything looked exactly as it should in a quiet Oregon suburb. But inside my house lived a stranger who poured coffee wrong, and somewhere in the Pacific, my daughter-in-law was checking into hotels with another man, while someone I'd never met watched our accounts and moved our money in carefully calculated increments. I thought about Eleanor, about how she used to tease me for seeing patterns in everything. Numbers, behaviors, inconsistencies. She'd called it my accountant brain, always looking for what didn't add up. Well, Eleanor, I thought, nothing adds up anymore. My phone buzzed one more time. David with a final message that made everything worse. Me on that second device in Maui. It's been logging in every 4 hours. Someone's checking constantly. They know you're home. They're watching you watch her. Knowing you're being watched changes how you move through your own home. Every conversation becomes performance, every gesture calculated. I'd built a career on reading people, on catching the small tells that revealed deception. Now I had to hide my own. Over breakfast, I started asking questions. Nothing aggressive, just casual conversation between family members who'd known each other for years. She was spreading jam on toast when I mentioned it. You know, I was thinking about that surgery you had, the appendix thing. Still bothers you sometimes, doesn't it? On your left side? She nodded without looking up. Yeah, especially when the weather changes. Gets a little tender. I took a sip of coffee to hide my expression. Rachel's appendix scar ran along her right side. I'd seen it countless times. This woman had just agreed to pain on the wrong side of her body. I let the moment pass, filed it away with the other inconsistencies. Later that morning, I found her reading in the living room. She looked up when I entered, that practiced smile appearing instantly. Brett mentioned he's been craving your homemade apple pie lately, I said. The one with the cinnamon lattice crust. You should make it for him when he gets back. Her face lit up. What a sweet idea. I'll bake one this weekend. It's been too long since I made that recipe. Rachel had never baked in her life. She'd told me once, laughing, that her mother had tried to teach her and given up after the third kitchen fire. Rachel bought pies from the artisan bakery downtown, the one Eleanor used to love. But this woman had just committed to spending a weekend baking something Rachel couldn't make. That afternoon, I tried something different. I was in the kitchen when she walked through, heading toward the back patio with a watering can. I called after her casually. "Well, thanks, sweetheart. I appreciate you taking care of those herbs." She smiled and kept walking. Brett never called Rachel sweetheart. He'd called her sunshine since their first date. Rachel had told me the story half a dozen times, always with this soft expression that said the nickname still made her happy. The real Rachel would have paused, maybe corrected me gently, or made a joke about it. This woman didn't even notice she'd been called by the wrong endearment. My phone buzzed around 4, Brett checking in from Hawaii. They had dinner at Roy's last night. I managed to get a better look. The guy's wearing a name badge. Adrian. Looks corporate professional. They're not hiding anything. I called David immediately. I need you to run a background check. Adrian probably connected to financial services somehow. His response came faster than I expected. Already on it. Been digging since you mentioned the offshore accounts. This guy's interesting. Interesting how... Interesting like barely exists on paper. Employment history is thin, shows up connected to a couple of consulting firms that dissolved under questionable circumstances. No criminal record, but I found 2 civil cases that got settled quietly. Both involved fraud allegations. I felt something cold settle in my chest. What kind of fraud? Financial restructuring schemes. Targeting individuals, not corporations. Both cases involved significant asset transfers right before divorce proceedings. The pattern was becoming clearer. Rachel hadn't stumbled into some affair. This was planned, calculated, professional. After David hung up, I stood in my office thinking about where someone might hide something they wanted kept secret, but still needed to access occasionally. Rachel had claimed her old iPhone was dead, the screen shattered beyond repair. She'd switched to a new one about 6 months ago, but people don't usually throw away phones immediately. I found it in the master bathroom, tucked in the back of the drawer, where we kept old medications and forgotten cosmetics. The screen wasn't shattered. It wasn't even cracked. I pressed the power button. The battery showed 4%, but it was enough. The screen illuminated, unlocked. She'd never changed the passcode. Messages loaded slowly, the phone struggling with its dying battery. A thread with someone saved only as A filled the screen. I scrolled through months of conversation, my pulse steady despite what I was reading. How much longer with the setup? Nina needs another week. She's learning the routines. He suspects anything. No, he's predictable. Won't check until it's too late. Nina's doing great. The messages went back months. Planning coordination updates. I kept scrolling, looking for anything that might tell me why. The phone's battery warning flashed. 2% remaining. Then I found it. A message from Rachel to Adrian sent 3 months ago. The timestamp showed late at night when Brett would have been on an overnight flight somewhere. Camden trusts me completely. Thinks of me as the daughter he never had. This will be easier than Florida. The phone died in my hand, screen going black. I stood in the bathroom staring at the dark rectangle of glass and metal while that last sentence repeated in my mind. This will be easier than Florida. Not their first time. Not even their second, probably. This was a pattern, a system, something they'd refined through practice. And somewhere in Florida, there was another family, another victim, another story like mine beginning to unfold. I thought about victims I'd seen in court cases I'd reviewed for clients. The hollowed-out look of someone who'd lost everything to people they'd trusted. I'd felt sorry for those victims, but I'd never truly understood until now. Because I was about to become one of them, I slipped the dead phone into my pocket and walked back downstairs. The woman who wasn't Rachel sat in the living room, reading her book, completely at ease in our home. She looked up when I passed. "Everything okay, Dad?" The word tasted wrong coming from her mouth now that I knew. Now that I understood she was part of something larger, more calculated than simple deception. "Everything's fine," I said. She smiled and returned to her book. I kept walking, kept my expression neutral, kept playing the role of the unsuspecting father-in-law. But inside, everything had changed. Because now I knew this wasn't about a failing marriage or a midlife crisis or any of the normal human messiness that breaks families apart. This was business. Professional, organized, and apparently successful enough that they'd done it before, in Florida, to someone who'd probably trusted them just as completely as I'd trusted Rachel. That dead phone sat in my desk drawer like evidence I couldn't yet use. The reference to Florida gnawed at me. Professional cons don't start with million-dollar targets. They build up to them, refining their approach with each victim. I opened my laptop and started searching. Adrian Cross fraud elderly victims. The results came slowly at first. Then I added one more word, Florida. The article appeared halfway down the second page. Local news from Tampa, 18 months old. The headline read, "Retired accountant loses life savings to investment scheme." The victim's name was Harold Whitmore, 76 years old, widower. His wife, Margaret, had passed away 2 years before. According to the reporter, Harold had trusted a financial advisor who'd promised to help him invest Margaret's life insurance payout. $800,000 gone within 6 months. The article didn't name the advisor, but it described the method. Personal connection through a grief support group. Promises to honor the late wife's memory through smart investments. Transfers to offshore accounts that proved untraceable. This was Rachel's template. I called Frank Morrison, a retired cop who still took private investigation work. "I need your help with something. Personal this time." His tone shifted immediately. "What kind of personal?" "The kind that involves my family and someone who needs justice." Frank listened without interrupting while I explained everything. When I finished, silence stretched between us. Finally, he spoke. "Harold Whitmore. I remember that case. He reported it to Tampa PD, but the evidence trail went cold. By the time anyone started investigating seriously, the money was gone, and so were the people who took it. Can you find him? I need to know if the woman he dealt with matches Rachel." Give me a couple hours." While I waited, Brett sent another update from Hawaii. A photo this time. Rachel and Adrian in the hotel lobby, his hand on the small of her back. Her face turned up toward his as they laughed. The body language was unmistakable. Frank called back faster than I expected. Found him. He's living in a care facility now. Lost his house after the money disappeared. I explained the situation. He's willing to meet. The next afternoon, I drove south through wine country. The coffee shop Frank had chosen sat on a quiet street corner, the kind of place that served as a community gathering spot. Harold Whitmore looked smaller than I'd imagined. He sat hunched in a corner booth, hands wrapped around a mug he wasn't drinking from. Frank sat across from him, watching him protectively. I slid into the booth beside Frank. Harold looked up, and I saw the hollowed-out expression of someone who'd stopped trusting their own judgment. "Mr. Whitmore, I'm Camden Pierce. Thank you for agreeing to meet." His voice came out quiet, but steady. "Frank says you're dealing with the same people who took everything from me." I pulled out my phone and showed him the photo Brett had sent. "This woman. Have you seen her before?" Harold's hand shook as he reached for my phone. He stared at the image for a long moment, and I watched his face crumble. "That's her. She called herself Rachel then too. Came to my grief support group 3 months after Margaret died. Said she'd lost her mother to the same cancer that took my wife. She cried with me, held my hand during the meetings." His voice broke. "She seemed to understand the emptiness that comes with losing someone after 40 years together. That was the approach. Find the wound mirror. It used shared grief to build trust. She told me she was a financial advisor." Harold continued. "Said she could help me invest Margaret's life insurance payout in a way that would honor her memory. I gave her everything." "How much contact did you have with this man?" I showed him a screenshot of Adrian. "Never saw him. It was just her. But there were mentions of a partner sometimes. Someone who handled the technical side." Frank leaned forward. "Harold's been working with me to track down others. We think there might be at least 2 more victims between Tampa and here. Same pattern. Widowers, grief groups, financial promises." The weight of it settled over me. This wasn't opportunistic crime. This was systematic predation. "Will you testify?" I asked. "When this goes to court, will you tell your story?" He looked at me with eyes that had seen too much loss. "If it means she can't do this to anyone else, yes. Margaret would want that." After Harold left with Frank, I sat alone, staring at my phone. I opened our family's insurance portal, something I hadn't checked in months. The beneficiary had been changed. 2 weeks ago. The same day Rachel left for Hawaii. Brett's life insurance policy. $2 million. Primary beneficiary, Rachel Pierce. The room seemed to tilt. Someone with access to our accounts had logged in and made the modification. The digital signature matched Rachel's login credentials. I called Frank immediately. "It's worse than we thought. She changed the beneficiary on Brett's life insurance. $2 million. Frank, they're not just after our money." He understood immediately. "You think they're planning something for your son?" I looked out the window at the peaceful street. "I think my daughter-in-law married my son as part of a long-term con. I think she's been planning this for 5 years. And I think Harold Whitmore is proof that when they're done with someone, they don't just walk away. Camden, you need to go to the police. With what right now all I have is a pattern and a previous victim. I need more before I can prove anything. Then what are you going to do?" "I'm going to keep digging until I have enough evidence that no court can ignore it. Because Brett's coming home in 2 days. And when he walks through that door, I need to be ready to protect him from the woman he thinks is his wife." That evening, I was reviewing financial records in my office when I heard the sound of cabinet doors opening and closing in the kitchen. Then the clink of pots. The hiss of a gas burner igniting. I walked to the kitchen doorway. Nina stood at the stove, her back to me, stirring something in a saucepan. On the counter beside her, a carton of heavy cream. a stick of butter partially unwrapped, a wedge of Parmesan cheese. My chest tightened. She glanced over her shoulder and smiled. I thought I'd make us dinner tonight. You've been working so hard. Fettuccine Alfredo, one of my favorites. I stared at the cream, at the butter, at the cheese. Rachel would never have brought those items into this house. 2 years ago, Rachel nearly died in this kitchen. It was a Saturday morning. She had made herself a latte using a sample pack of flavored creamer someone had given her as a gift. Within minutes, her throat began to swell. Her face turned red, then pale. She clawed at her neck, gasping for air. I called 911 while Brett grabbed the epinephrine pen we kept in the bathroom cabinet. By the time the paramedics arrived, Rachel was on the floor, trembling and barely conscious. The doctor at the emergency room told us she had suffered anaphylactic shock, a severe dairy allergy. He said if we had waited even 2 more minutes, she might not have made it. After that day, everything changed. We cleared the house of all dairy products. No milk, no cheese, no butter, no cream. Rachel became obsessive about reading ingredient labels. She would check them twice, sometimes 3 times before eating anything. At restaurants, she always asked the server to confirm there was no dairy in her meal. She carried 2 epinephrine pens everywhere she went. Rachel had not allowed dairy in this house for 3 years. Yet here was Nina standing at the stove, stirring heavy cream into melted butter without a trace of concern. I kept my voice steady. "That smells good. Thanks," she said brightly. "It'll be ready in about 10 minutes." I returned to my office and sat down, my hands shaking. I pulled out my phone and opened a note. Test 1. She brought dairy into the house. Rachel would never do that. 10 minutes later, Nina called me to the table. 2 plates of fettuccine Alfredo sat waiting, the sauce thick and golden clinging to the noodles. The smell was rich, creamy, unmistakable. I sat across from her, fork in hand, watching closely. She picked up her fork and twirled a generous portion onto it. The creamy sauce clung to the noodles. She took a bite, chewed, and swallowed. No hesitation, no questions, no panic. I waited. She took another bite. Then another. She ate steadily, casually, as if this were any other meal. She even smiled at me between bites. "This turned out really well," she said. "I was worried I'd oversalt it." My chest tightened. I forced myself to take a small bite of my own pasta, though I barely tasted it. I watched her fork move from plate to mouth again and again. She ate half the plate before pausing to take a sip of water. Still no reaction. No rash, no swelling, no shortness of breath, no reaching for an epinephrine pen. Rachel would never have taken even 1 bite. She wouldn't have cooked it. She wouldn't have touched the cream. She wouldn't have allowed it in the house. I set my fork down carefully. My hands were trembling, but I kept my voice calm. "This is delicious. Thank you." She finished the rest of her meal without incident. When she was done, she stood and carried her plate to the sink, rinsing it off before placing it in the dishwasher. Then she turned back to me with that same easy smile. "I'm glad you liked it. I think I'll head up early tonight. I'm a little tired." I nodded. "Sure, get some rest." She disappeared upstairs, and I sat alone at the table, staring at the empty chair across from me. The woman in my house was not my daughter-in-law. I pulled out my phone and texted David Torres. She cooked and ate a full plate of Alfredo. No reaction. It's not her. His reply came within seconds. "I'm on my way. Don't do anything until I get there." David arrived 40 minutes later. I let him in through the side door, and we stood in the dim light of the kitchen, speaking in low voices. He carried a small black case with him, the kind of equipment bag a tech specialist would use. "I'm going to sweep the house," he said quietly. "If they're watching you, there's a good chance they've planted something." I nodded, my throat dry. David moved through the living room first, running a small handheld device along the walls behind picture frames under tables. I followed a few steps behind, my pulse hammering in my ears. It didn't take long. He found the first device behind a framed photo of Brett and Rachel on their wedding day. A tiny microphone no bigger than a shirt button tucked into the back of the frame. The second was in the kitchen, hidden inside the decorative bowl we kept on the counter. The third was upstairs in the bedroom behind the headboard. David held up the last device between his thumb and forefinger, his expression grim. "They've been listening to everything," he said. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Every conversation, every phone call, every moment I thought I was alone. They knew I was watching her, and now they knew I knew. David's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then looked up at me, his face pale. "Camden," he said quietly. "Brett just sent me a message. He says Rachel and Adrian checked out of the hotel early this morning. They're not in Hawaii anymore." My blood ran cold. "Where are they?" David's jaw tightened. He doesn't know. David arrived at 9 the next morning, carrying a leather tool bag and wearing a navy polo shirt with a small logo embroidered on the chest. To anyone watching, he looked like a contractor making a service call. I opened the door before he could knock. "Morning, Camden," he said, his voice loud enough to carry. "Got your message about the Wi-Fi acting up. Let's take a look." I nodded and stepped aside. Nina appeared in the hallway a moment later, wrapped in a cardigan, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp. "Oh," she said, glancing at David. "I didn't know we were having someone over." "Just a quick fix," I said evenly. "David's helped me with tech issues before." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Would you like some coffee?" David set his bag down near the router in the corner of the living room. "That'd be great, thanks." Nina disappeared into the kitchen. I heard the clink of mugs, the hiss of the coffee maker. David knelt by the router and opened his bag, pulling out a small black device no bigger than a deck of cards. He glanced up at me and gave a single deliberate nod. We both knew what we were really here to do. He moved through the living room first, running the handheld scanner along the walls behind furniture under shelves. I stood near the window pretending to check my phone. Nina returned with 2 mugs of coffee and set them on the side table. She lingered for a moment, watching David work. "Is it a serious problem?" she asked. David didn't look up. "Just interference. Happens sometimes with older routers. I'll have it sorted in a few minutes." She nodded slowly, then retreated to the couch, cradling her own mug. Her gaze followed David's every movement. He found the first device behind the framed photo of Brett and Rachel on their wedding day. The same spot he'd checked the night before. He carefully lifted the frame, angled it toward me, and tapped the back with his finger. I saw it then, a tiny black disc, no larger than a button, nestled into the wooden backing. David set the frame down and moved into the kitchen. Nina stayed on the couch, but I could feel her attention sharpening. David crouched near the lower cabinets, opened his tablet, and pretended to adjust something on the screen. Then he turned the tablet toward me. The display showed a live audio waveform pulsing in green and red. Below it, a line of text read, "Active transmission. Offshore server. Installed 14 days ago." 14 days. The same day Nina had walked into this house. David moved upstairs next. I followed, leaving Nina alone in the living room. In my bedroom, he found the third device tucked behind the headboard, exactly where he'd shown me the night before. He held it up between his thumb and forefinger, then mouthed 2 words, 24/7. I felt my jaw tighten. David pulled a small Ziploc bag from his toolkit and carefully placed each device inside, sealing it shut. Evidence. Then he returned downstairs, made a show of adjusting the router, and packed up his equipment. "All set," he announced. "Should be good to go now." Nina stood her smile back in place. "That was fast." "Easy fix," David said. He glanced at me. "Let me know if you have any other issues." I walked him to the door. As he stepped outside, he leaned in slightly and whispered, "They've been recording everything. Someone's been reviewing the files." I nodded once. He squeezed my shoulder and left. I closed the door and stood in the entryway for a long moment, listening to the silence of the house. Then my phone buzzed. It was Brett. Rachel and Adrian checked out early this morning. They're flying back tomorrow. Dad, they're coming home. My chest went cold. Tomorrow. They were cutting the trip short. They must have sensed something was wrong. I typed back quickly. Stay calm. Don't let them know you're watching. I'll handle it. I walked into my office and closed the door. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through my contacts and found Margaret Stone's number. She was a family attorney I'd worked with years ago when Eleanor and I had updated our wills. Sharp, thorough, and unshakable. She answered on the second ring. "Aw, Camden," she said warmly. "It's been a while. What can I do for you?" I kept my voice low. "I need to file for legal protection before tomorrow. Police are ready, but this has to be handled quietly. My daughter-in-law is attempting to take control of family assets, and I believe she's planning to harm my son." There was a pause. Then her tone shifted all business. "How much time do we have?" "Oh, it's less than 24 hours. I'll draft an emergency petition for a restraining order and asset freeze. I'll need documentation. Financial records, anything that shows unusual activity." "I have it." "Ah, good. Send it to me within the hour. I'll have this filed by end of day." "Thank you, Margaret. We'll get through this, Camden. Stay safe." I hung up and immediately began forwarding files to her. The withdrawal records, the insurance beneficiary, change the hotel charges, the offshore server logs David had captured. Everything. By the time the sun set, I was exhausted, but I couldn't rest. That night I heard Nina on the phone. I had left my bedroom door open a crack, and her voice drifted up from the kitchen below. She was speaking quietly, but the house was old and sound carried. "He brought someone in to sweep the place," she said. Her voice was tight, anxious. "What do you mean you disabled them remotely?" "Fine. We stick to the plan. Just one more day. Adrian, what if he knows?" There was a long silence. Then she spoke again, softer now. "Okay, I trust you. See you tomorrow." I heard her footsteps on the stairs. I closed my door silently and stood in the dark, my pulse hammering in my ears. They were coming home tomorrow, and they thought I still didn't know. But I did, and I was ready. The email arrived while the sky was still dark. I had barely slept. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, and I reached for it instinctively, squinting at the screen. Frank Morrison. The timestamp read 6:47 in the morning. The subject line was simple: "You need to see this." I sat up and opened the attachment. It was a scanned document, official and cold in its precision. A birth certificate from Salem, Oregon, dated 28 years ago. Rachel Marie Henley, born at 3:21 in the morning. Nina Marie Henley, born at 3:48 in the morning. 27 minutes apart. Twins. I stared at the screen, my pulse thudding in my ears. The pieces fell into place with a sickening clarity. The identical faces, the mirrored mannerisms, the ease with which Nina had slipped into Rachel's life. They weren't strangers playing a part. They were sisters. Frank's email continued below the birth certificate, each line more damning than the last. Parents, Michael and Susan Henley, both deceased, killed in a car accident when the twins were 19. No other family. The girls had been on their own ever since. Rachel's employment history. A string of short-term positions, each one connected to an older man or a wealthy family. Personal assistant to a real estate developer in Scottsdale. Executive coordinator for a hedge fund manager in Tucson. Event planner for a retired tech executive in Boca Raton. None of the jobs lasted more than 18 months, and each one ended quietly with no forwarding information. Nina's history, acting classes in Portland, a few bit parts in local theater. Struggling, unemployed for the past 3 years, until 2 weeks ago. Then came the name I'd been dreading, Adrian Cross. Frank had traced him back 6 years. 6. That was 1 year before Rachel had met Brett. Adrian had a record fraud investigations in Arizona and Nevada, both cases dropped due to lack of evidence. 2 victims in Arizona, both elderly. Harold Whitmore in Florida, and now us. Frank's next paragraph made my chest tighten. Rachel met Brett 5 years ago at a charity gala in Portland. I checked the guest list. Adrian Cross was also in attendance, listed as a consultant for the event sponsor. The meeting wasn't accidental, Camden. It was orchestrated. I set the phone down and pressed my palms against my eyes. 5 years. Everything had been a lie from the very beginning. I remembered that night. Brett had come home glowing, telling me about the woman he'd met. She was kind, he said. She listened. She understood what it was like to lose someone. She had lost her parents young, just like he'd lost Eleanor. It had all been calculated. Frank's final note was the hardest to read. Rachel never loved your son. She studied him. She found his weakness, his longing for family after losing his mother, and she became exactly what he needed. This wasn't love, Camden. This was a performance. I sat on the edge of the bed, the phone still glowing in my hand. 5 years of dinners. 5 years of holidays. 5 years of watching Brett light up every time Rachel walked into a room. All of it had been theater. I thought of the way she'd learned to cook his favorite meals. The way she'd laughed at his stories, even the ones he'd told a dozen times. The way she'd held his hand at Eleanor's grave and told him it was okay to grieve. She had studied him like a script, and she had played her role flawlessly. I stood and walked to the window. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of pale gray and amber. Somewhere out there, Rachel and Adrian were on a plane flying back to finish what they'd started. But they didn't know we were waiting. I pulled up Brett's number and called. He answered on the second ring, his voice rough with sleep. "Dad, what's wrong?" "I need you to sit down," I said quietly. There was a pause. Then I heard the rustle of sheets, the creak of a chair. "Okay, I'm sitting." I told him everything. The birth certificate, the twin sister, Adrian's history, the staged charity event, the years of planning. Brett didn't say a word. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. But Brett, when he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. 5 years, Dad. I loved her every single day. How could I not see it? My throat tightened. Because you loved her with a true heart. That's what makes you good son. And that's what made you vulnerable. He let out a shaky breath. I trusted her. I gave her everything. I know. Another long silence. Then his voice came back harder now. Steadier. When does she land? Tomorrow afternoon, 2 o'clock at Portland. I'll be there, he said. I need to see her face when we expose this. I gripped the phone tighter. Brett, you don't have to. Yes, I do. His voice was firm now, almost cold. She took 5 years of my life, Dad. She made me believe we had a future. I need to look her in the eye when it all comes down. I didn't argue. I understood. Margaret has filed the paperwork, I said. The accounts are frozen. The police are ready. When she steps off that plane, it's over. Brett exhaled slowly. Good. We stayed on the line for a moment longer, neither of us speaking. Then Brett broke the silence. Dad, yeah, thank you for not giving up, for figuring it out. My chest ached. You're my son. I would do anything to protect you. I know, he said softly. I'll see you tomorrow. The call ended. I stood at the window watching the sun climb higher. Tomorrow, Rachel and Adrian would walk into a trap they didn't see coming. Tomorrow, the performance would end. And tomorrow, my son would finally see the truth. I just hoped he could survive it. Friday arrived with a brittle calm, the kind that comes before a storm. I woke early, dressed carefully, and made coffee in the kitchen as if it were any other morning. Nina was still asleep upstairs. I had to keep everything normal. just one more day. Margaret called at 8:15. It's done, she said, her voice crisp and efficient. The emergency orders were filed at 7 this morning. All joint accounts are frozen as of 9. Any attempted withdrawals or transfers will be blocked. The beneficiary changes on Brett's life insurance have been reversed. If Rachel or Nina try to access anything, they'll be denied and flagged immediately. I gripped the phone tighter. What about the house? She's protected. I've also filed for a restraining order pending the outcome of tomorrow's confrontation. The police are coordinated. Camden, everything is in place. Thank you, Margaret. We'll get through this, she said quietly. Stay safe. I hung up and stared at the coffee in my hand. 9 o'clock. In less than an hour, every financial door Rachel had pried open would slam shut. David arrived just after 9:30 carrying 2 large equipment cases and wearing a plain gray jacket. He gave me a single nod as I let him in. Morning, he said, his voice low. I'm here to install the security upgrade we discussed. Nina appeared at the top of the stairs wrapped in a robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. Another technician. I kept my tone light. David's upgrading the cameras. With everything that's been happening lately, I want better coverage. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. Okay. I'll stay out of the way. She disappeared into the bedroom. David and I exchanged a glance. Over the next 2 hours, David moved through the house methodically, installing small, discrete cameras in the living room, kitchen, hallway, and entryway. Each one was legally compliant, time-stamped, and would record everything that happened tomorrow. When he finished, he showed me the feed on his tablet. Every angle was covered. You'll have a complete record, he said quietly. Audio and video, admissible in court. I nodded. Good. He left through the side door and I was alone again. That afternoon, I drove to a small coffee shop in Newburgh, 20 minutes outside Pinehurst. Frank was already there, sitting in a corner booth with Harold Whitmore. Harold looked older than he had the last time I'd seen him. His hands trembled slightly as he held his mug of tea. His eyes were red-rimmed, hollowed by grief and exhaustion. I slid into the booth across from them and pulled out my phone. I opened the photo Brett had sent me from the plane, Rachel and Adrian sitting close together, her hand resting on his arm. I turned the screen toward Harold. Is this the woman who took your money? Harold leaned forward, squinting at the image. His face went pale. Then his jaw tightened and his hands clenched into fists. That's her, he said, his voice shaking. That's the woman who promised to honor Margaret through smart investments. She said she understood what it was like to lose someone. She said she could help me make Margaret's memory mean something. His voice cracked. She took everything. Tears rolled down his cheeks. Frank placed a hand on his shoulder. I leaned forward, my voice steady. Harold, I need you to testify. Tomorrow. Can you do that? He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and nodded. Yes. I want to see her face when she realizes she can't run anymore. Thank you, I said quietly. They will pay for what they've done. Harold looked at me, his expression hollow but resolute. I hope so. Because people like her, they don't just take your money. They take your ability to trust. They take your future. I knew exactly what he meant. I drove home as the sun began to set, the sky streaked with orange and violet. When I walked through the door, the smell of roasted chicken filled the house. Nina had cooked dinner. She was setting the table when I entered the kitchen. She looked up and smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You were gone so long, she said. I hung my coat on the back of a chair. Just running errands. She poured 2 glasses of wine, but her hands trembled slightly as she set mine down. I watched her closely. She was nervous. We ate in near silence. Halfway through the meal, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then excused herself and walked into the living room. I stayed at the table listening. Her voice was low, but the house was quiet, and I could hear every word. Dear Rachel, he's acting strange, she said. The accounts are frozen. I tried to transfer money this afternoon, but it was blocked. There was a pause. Then I heard Rachel's voice, faint but clear, coming through the phone on speaker. Don't panic, Nina. If he confronts you, cry. Play the victim. Tell him you were scared that Adrian manipulated you. Camden loves me. He'll protect me from the con man. Nina's voice was shaky. What if he doesn't believe me? Another voice cut in. Adrian. If that doesn't work, he said coldly, we have plan B. Nina hesitated. What's plan B? Adrian's voice was calm, almost amused. Let's just say Brett's car won't be as reliable as he thinks on that mountain drive home. My blood ran cold. Nina's breath hitched. Adrian, you can't. I can, he said. And I will if it comes to that. We've come too far to lose now. The call ended. I sat frozen at the table, my hands gripping the edge so tightly my knuckles turned white. They weren't just trying to steal from us. They were planning to murder my son. I pulled out my phone and texted Brett immediately. Do not drive your car until further notice. Have it inspected by a mechanic you trust. Your life may be in danger. This is not a drill. His reply came within seconds. Understood. What's happening? I'll explain tomorrow. Stay safe. I set the phone down and stared at the empty doorway where Nina had been standing. She returned a moment later, her face composed, her smile back in place. Everything okay? I asked. Fine, she said lightly. Just checking in with a friend. I nodded and took a sip of wine, even though my stomach had turned to stone. Tomorrow, when Rachel walked through that door thinking she was safe, she would find out what happens when you threaten a father's son. Right now, Rachel has no idea what's waiting for her. She's about to walk into a room full of people who know the entire scheme. But before I show you that moment, before the masks come off, comment the number 9 below if you're still here with me. I want to know who's invested in seeing this through to the end. Please note what follows includes fictional elements added for storytelling purposes and may not represent actual occurrences. If this content isn't for you, you're welcome to exit now. But if you're ready to witness accountability, stay right where you are. The car pulled into the driveway at 2:47 in the afternoon. I was standing in the living room, hands in my pockets, watching through the window. The black sedan came to a stop near the front steps. The driver's door opened and Rachel stepped out. She looked exactly as I remembered. Burgundy sweater, pearl earrings, the same floral scarf Brett had described draped loosely around her neck. She pulled a small suitcase from the trunk, closed it with a soft thud, and turned toward the house. Her smile was bright, practiced, effortless. She had no idea. I heard the front door open. Her footsteps echoed in the entryway. Dad, I'm home. Her voice was warm, familiar, full of that easy affection she'd perfected over 5 years. She set her suitcase down and walked into the living room, arms open as if to embrace me. Then she saw Nina. Nina was standing in the hallway halfway between the kitchen and the stairs. She looked pale, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. For a split second, Rachel's face went blank. Her eyes widened. Then just as quickly, she forced a smile back onto her face. Nina, she said, her voice climbing an octave. What are you doing here? Nina opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her eyes darted to me, then back to Rachel. Nina stammered. Rachel, he knows everything. Rachel's smile faltered. She turned to me slowly, her expression shifting from confusion to something harder. I didn't move. I kept my voice calm, steady. See that you weren't on a business trip, I said. That you were in Hawaii with Adrian Cross. That your sister has been living here for the past 2 weeks, impersonating you. The room went silent. Rachel stared at me, her jaw tight. Then she laughed. It was a short, forced sound, almost disbelieving. Dad, I don't know what Nina told you, but I know everything, Rachel. Her smile disappeared entirely. She took a step forward, her hands raised in a placating gesture. Tears began to well in her eyes. Dad, please, she said, her voice breaking. I can explain. Adrian was helping me investigate something. I didn't want to worry you or Brett, so I— Stop. My voice cut through the air like a blade. Rachel froze. Harold Whitmore, I said. Florida, $800,000. Should I continue? The tears vanished. Her face went cold, hard, empty. The mask was gone. You can't prove anything, she said quietly. I held her gaze. I don't have to. Harold will. Her jaw clenched. She was calculating now, searching for a way out. Then the front door opened again. Brett walked in. Rachel spun around, and for a moment I saw relief flash across her face. She stepped toward him, her expression softening, her hand reaching out. Brett, she said, her voice trembling. Thank God. Your father's lost his mind. He thinks Brett didn't move. His face was stone. I saw you, he said. Rachel stopped. What? In Hawaii, with him. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Brett's voice was low, cold, controlled. I was your pilot, Rachel. I saw you holding his hand, kissing him in the hotel lobby. Rachel's face drained of color. She took a step back, shaking her head. Brett, no, you don't understand. Don't, Brett said, his voice breaking slightly. Don't lie to me anymore. She opened her mouth again, but before she could speak, the front door swung open one more time. Adrian Cross walked in. He was tall, confident, dressed in a dark blazer and jeans. He looked around the room with a casual arrogance, as if he owned the place. His eyes landed on me, and he smiled. Mr. Pierce, he said smoothly. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I didn't respond. I just stared at him. Adrian glanced at Rachel, then at Nina, then back to me. His smile didn't waver. Rachel and I have been working together on a financial consulting project, he said. If there's been any confusion about our relationship, I apologize. But I assure you, everything has been perfectly professional. I took a step forward. Is that what you told Harold Whitmore? Adrian's smile flickered. Just for a second. I don't know who that is, he said. Liar. The voice came from behind him. Adrian turned. Margaret Stone stood in the doorway, flanked by two police officers in uniform. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were sharp as steel. Adrian Cross. She said, her voice clear and measured. You're being summoned for questioning in multiple fraud investigations. Officers, please escort him. Adrian's face went rigid. He glanced at Rachel, then at the officers, then back to Margaret. I'm not going anywhere without a lawyer, he said. That's your right, Margaret replied. But you're going. The officers stepped forward. Adrian's arrogance cracked just slightly. He shot Rachel a look, but she didn't meet his eyes. She was staring at the floor, her hands trembling. Then another figure stepped through the doorway. Harold Whitmore. He was smaller than I remembered, bent slightly with age, but his eyes were sharp and unwavering. He walked slowly into the room, his cane tapping softly against the hardwood floor. Rachel's head snapped up. Her face went white. No, she whispered. You can't be here. Harold stopped a few feet away from her. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. I'm broken, he said quietly. I was. You did that to me. You took my wife's memory and turned it into a con. You made me feel like I had something to live for, and then you stole everything. Rachel's mouth opened, but no words came out. Harold's voice was steady, now stronger. But this man gave me something back. He looked at me. Justice. Rachel's knees buckled slightly. She caught herself on the arm of the couch, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Adrian was handcuffed, now being led toward the door. He glanced back at Rachel one last time, his face twisted in fury. You said this was foolproof, he hissed. Rachel didn't respond. She just stood there staring at Harold, her face hollow and pale. Margaret stepped forward, her voice calm and final. Rachel Pierce, you're being detained for questioning in connection with multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent. Rachel's eyes darted to Brett. To me, to Nina. Then slowly she sank onto the couch and buried her face in her hands. Margaret set her briefcase on the coffee table and opened it with a soft click. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Rachel sat on the couch, her hands clenched in her lap. Nina stood near the window, trembling. Brett leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. Adrian stood near the entryway, flanked by the two officers. Margaret pulled out a thick folder and set it on the table. She looked at Rachel, her expression calm and professional. "Let's go through this systematically," she said. She opened the folder and pulled out the first set of documents. Receipts, hotel